So in this video I'm just going to cover some basic information about creating a database in Microsoft Access, and I'm going to cover creating tables, relationships and data entry forms. So when you first open Microsoft Access 2010 you'll see a list of possible templates, but we're just going to open a blank database because we're going to do all the hard work ourselves. When you first open a blank database, Microsoft Access very helpfully puts you straight into the datasheet view, which enables you to enter your columns or your fields and actually put data straight into them. This is wrong on so many levels. It should actually be banned. So you should step away from the datasheet view, use the little triangular icon in the corner and change to the design view, which is much better. Changing the view to the design view allows you to enter data types for the different fields and also set some of the properties. This is far more useful because otherwise you're more likely to end up in the datasheet view having every single one of your fields as the same data type, probably text, and that's not always going to be appropriate. So if you stick with the design view, when you change, unfortunately you will have to save your table, but please give it a sensible table name. Don't just leave it as table 1, call it something meaningful. Okay, so here's one I've prepared earlier. As you can see, it's a table relating to football teams. I'm going to hold information about different teams. And the first thing you can see here, apart from the sensible table name, in the circle there's a little symbol, looks like a key. That's just to indicate that that attribute, the club ID, that will be the primary key for this table. And I've set it to auto number, which means that Access will just allocate the key for me. So each time I create a new record, it will put a new value in there, and it'll make sure that it's unique. It just saves me doing it. The next thing to look at is the diamond for the field called current, and that's just set to a boolean, which is either a yes/no value, sometimes known as true or false. And it just means that I can tick that and I can say yes, this club is current. And also, just to help people who come after me, who might look after the system in the future, might maintain it, I've actually put in a rectangle a little comment just saying what's stored in that field. And then also you can see the star. I've put a little adjustment in there. It defaults in to 255 characters, which is rather a lot, more than you would normally need. So I've reduced that down to 30, and you'll see when we're going to create a data entry form that just makes things a lot more convenient. So in this scenario we're going to keep a record of the football clubs, the players who play for them, and a record of who transferred into the club. So as you can see in the football clubs table, the blue one, we're keeping a record of the club ID, the description, the ground, and whether or not they're current. And then the players, we're just keeping simple details of the forename, surname, and the preferred role within the team. And then the transfers, we're keeping the transfer ID, and then we link in for the club ID and the player ID, and then we have the date in and the date out. Obviously if the date out is blank on a particular record, it means that they're still there. And then you might also want to record details of the fee paid. So once you've created your tables in Access, you can actually use the relationship option on the Database Tools tab to actually link the tables together, and that is that you're linking the primary key with the foreign key in each case. So in this instance, you take in the player ID from one table and you click on it and drag it to the player ID on the other table. Then you get the little pop-up box, and this gives you a chance to tick the 3 boxes that are there to enforce referential integrity. And for the time being it's probably a good idea to do that, because then that just keeps all of the data intact. Then you hit the create button and your relationship should be there. So the next task is to create the data entry forms, and I find it easiest to use the form wizard to create the forms. And you'll find the form wizard on the create tab. So if you select the table that the form's to be based on, in this case I'm using football teams to start off with, and then use the double chevron to put the required fields over to the right, then click finish. As simple as that, the finished form should be displayed. If you repeat that not only for the football teams but then for the football players, because they're the easiest ones to start with. So the next task after that is to create the transfer form. Now this gets a little bit trickier because you're really taking the details from the other two forms and bringing them together onto the final form to record which player has moved into which team. Now you start off with the basic information. You can put the transfer ID across to the right using the single chevron and then the club ID. But it won't make much sense when you see the finished form if all you see on there is the club ID. You won't remember, if you've got 30 or 40 teams, which one belongs to that club ID. So it's best then to actually change the table selection from the drop-down list and to actually choose the football team's table, and then you can actually put across the name of the football team as well, and that just makes things a little bit clearer. Then in the table selection combo box you can go back to your transfers and put the next details over which relates to the player, and then once you've done that you can actually repeat the same thing again. To actually give more information about the player, you can choose the player table from the drop down list and then transfer over the player's forename and the surname. Then once more if you go back to your transfer table and put the remainder of the fields across. Now this might seem a little bit fussy and a little bit finicky, but in terms of your actual end user who might use the form in future, it's far more user friendly, far more helpful to actually display the details instead of just having potentially a list of ID numbers that won't mean anything to anybody. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is hit the finish button and you can actually see how it all turns out. So when you come to enter data into this database, you must bear in mind referential integrity. That means that you must actually create a club first and create a player and then create a transfer record. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to try and create a transfer for a player that doesn't exist or to try and put them into a club that doesn't exist. And of course, to ensure good quality data is recorded, you should consider using things like combo boxes, input masks and validation rules where appropriate, and that's going to be the subject of the third and final video.